So we don't know the whole truth yet about the Jussie Smollett case. I mean, the police now say, the Chicago cops now say that they are looking to talk to him again because the two people who are the people of interest turned out to be these two Nigerian brothers, one of whom worked on the show Empire. He was like an extra on Empire. And they are saying, according to sources, they are saying that they were paid, that Smollett paid them $4,000 to stage this attack in which they put a noose around his neck and poured bleach on him and called him names. They even rehearsed the attack before they did it so that they would get it right. It's a pretty damaging story. Smollett has hired an attorney to defend him. He hasn't gone back and talked to the cops. There are rumors that they're convening a grand jury and that he risks 3 years in prison for filing a false report. You know, the first thing we have to deal with about this is the way the press has treated this story, because this is the second time in about a month, the other time being the Covington story, that they fell for their own narrative, that they walked into the cloud of unknowing that is created by surrounding yourself with like-minded people and only like-minded people and never getting the news from any other source. And they fell into that with the Covington kids, where they believed this kind of, I think he's a con man, basically, who goes around being a Native American chieftain, but is really just an activist and who didn't represent himself accurately, either as a Vietnam War veteran or as what he was doing when he was attacking these high schoolers. So that was that. And then with Smollett, they did the same thing. Last week, we played this montage of them just like credulously reporting this attack on this guy, which, remember, it happened at 2 o'clock in the morning. It's like, I don't know what the temperature was, but it was cold. It was 20 degrees below zero. Implausible that two guys are out there waiting for Jussie Smollett. You know what we're going to do? Let's get dressed up in our Arctic overcoats and go attack the star of this show that we never watch and tell him we're in MAGA country when we're in Chi-Town. Let me just remind you by playing, because the most egregious one was, of course, Good Morning America, run by our old friend George Snuffleupagus, the Clinton hack, the guy who said to Hillary Clinton, "I love you, Hillary," the guy who defended Bill against charges from all those women, those charges that we now know were probably true. That's the guy who runs ABC News. And on that show, Robin Roberts interviewed Jussie Smollett. And here is just a quick montage of her basically justifying this guy on Good Morning America, talking about the story he told.
An account that Chicago police have said has been consistent. He hasn't changed his story. They also said it's credible. Police have said that, and also that he has been very cooperative. It's been 2 weeks since that night left actor Jussie Smollett bruised but not broken, and he's still processing the raw emotions. Have you ever been threatened before?
Yeah. I get threatened all the time.
And I asked him about if there were other possible threats that he had received, and he did talk about the letter that was sent to the Fox studio where Empire is set. Police have confirmed that letter. And despite lack of video surveillance footage, Smollett hopes to rewrite the narrative about that night, saying he fought back against his attackers and reported the incident after his creative director called 911. And there is no doubt in your mind what motivated this attack.
I could only go off of their words.
Which he wrote. And by the way, I did watch this as a writer, as a guy who's actually written movies. Watching this guy, I was reminded of the famous movie All About Eve, in which the playwright turns to the actress and says to her, "At what point do actors begin thinking that they make up their own lines?" Every writer knows that actors are just completely incompetent there because they're always making suggestions for the story that make them look good but make the story make no sense, which is why so many movies are bad, because the star has so much power. Here's a good example of a guy telling a story that, I'm sorry, from the minute he said it, I thought, this is not a plausible story. I don't want to run the guy down. I was actually a fan of the first season of the show, and a fan specifically of his because of his storyline and his incredible talent as a singer. And of course, is the news media taking responsibility? Is there any chance that they will begin to ask questions and reform themselves? And the only way for them to reform themselves is to start hiring some Trump supporters in the editorial positions. That's the only way to do it. The only way is to hire some conservatives to argue with them. They don't have to be Trump supporters, but they have to be people who don't think Trump is the devil himself, is the devil incarnate. Here is Brian Stelter, CNN's man on the move about the media. This is the guy who's supposed to hold the media to account. And he says, basically, no, we didn't do anything wrong. He says, this is really about Jussie Smollett. This is not about the media. And in some sense, that's true, because I want to ask you a question about this guy, just to get him in your head, because think about a guy who does this, right? In my lifetime, I'm not that, no matter what Shapiro says, I'm not that old, and yet I'm old enough to remember the first black everything. The first black anything, I remember it in showbiz. The first black guy on TV, the first black guy to head a series, the first black woman to have a series, all this stuff I remember. Jussie Smollett did none of that. He did none of it, okay? I remember when gay people could be arrested for being gay. That was in my lifetime. Gay people could be arrested just for being gay. That was vice, okay? Here is Jussie Smollett didn't change any of that. He's too young. He wasn't there. His life is a gift. His life is, I walk in, you're going to play you're a gay guy, so you're going to play the gay black guy on Empire and make whatever incredible amount of money you're making for pretending to be that guy. And we're going to tell a story about you in which you'll be very sympathetic and you'll be a hero. Jussie Smollett should be waking up every morning going, what a great country! I love this! What a life I have! Everything is great! Everything is tickety-boo! This is terrific! Instead, it is important to him, think about this for a minute, he needs to be a victim. He needs to say, I was attacked, I was threatened, I was endangered, people threw bleach and called me names. He needs that so badly. If this story is true, and I know we don't know this for a fact yet, but the story up till now has been implausible, and now it's a lot more plausible. But if this story is true, that was what was important to him. No gratitude for who he is or what's happened to him or the people who went before him who made his life possible. Just, it's still going on. Everybody likes to think that they have struggled and succeeded at things. I always love it when guys stand up in at an award show and they've won the Oscar or the Grammy or something, one of these self-congratulating things that showbiz is rife with, and they say, they told us it couldn't be done. And I always think, I would like the names of anyone who told you it couldn't be done. Who tells people things can't be done in this country? Anything virtually can be done in this country. Donald Trump is president. Anything can happen in this country. Nobody got in your way. Nobody got in Jussie Smollett's way. Does he get hate mail? Yeah, I get hate mail. Everybody gets hate mail. It's a crazy country. Everybody has access to everybody. We all get, lies told about us and horrible, horrible things said about us. But it was necessary for him. Think about that. That's the narrative that he is living in. It's a left-wing narrative. And not only does it does it shade the way people tell the truth, but it also keeps people from telling the truth. Not only does it shade the way they report the facts, but it keeps people from saying the facts. Here is Camelli Foster from Freethink Media. He's on Brian Stelter's show, or he's on a CNN media show. And he talks about the fact that people off camera doubted this, but wouldn't go on camera and talk about it. And he talks about why. This is cut number 6.
At a minimum, there were people who, I've talked to people off camera, I've talked to people sort of in green rooms who were skeptical, who had questions about this story, were afraid to raise those concerns because of the intersectional nature of this particular accusation. And there are plenty of circumstances like that. And that is something that we have to be aware of. When there are stories that involve very sensitive issues of race and sexuality, and there are accusations and allegations that are being made, when you raise questions about those allegations, it is often the case that people will raise questions about your motivations. Look, I am talking about these stories. I'm talking about the merit of a particular charge. And at the end of the day, it's whether or not that charge has merit that matters. And Robin Robbins, in that conversation, in that interview, had an opportunity to say, there are practical reasons for someone to ask questions about something like this that have nothing to do with your race or your sexuality. She didn't do that, and there are far too many instances where serious journalists aren't doing that.
True. And I wonder if Foster, this fellow who's talking, I wonder if he thinks to himself, well, wait, maybe that means the entire intersectional narrative is wrong. Maybe if intersectionality produces the inability to speak the truth, maybe there's something at the core of intersectionality. Because earlier on, he actually says, well, we know for a fact that Trump supporters are racist. And you go, do you? How many of you interviewed? What are the polls? Where's your study? How do you know? And what's your definition of racist? I mean, even your definition of racist is part of the narrative. You walk into a prison and you look into the cells and you see that all the people there are black. Is that evidence of racism, or is it evidence that there are no fathers in black families? It's the narrative. You don't know what the narrative is. You have to get a lot of facts and study it from a lot of different angles before you can figure out what the narrative is. Are black people in prison because people don't like black people, or are they in prison because they don't have fathers? It's a perfectly good question to ask. And if all you do is shout racist, 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 you shut down the narrative.